feel settled if it's like this.
Because
I've not got a hood, so.
Hello and welcome to Soul Talk Podcast. And today we're just having a giggle because I have my husband Adam on the podcast today. And we're just actually, just so you know how funny this is, that we're actually trying to do a podcast together. We talk all the time, but it's a different setting. And we're sat on the other side. Normally I would be sat on that side and you'd be on this side when we chat. So you wanted to come on to talk about something specific, but let's just hear a little bit about you first. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm Adam. I'd say a very sort of mixed type of person in the sense of race and interest. I come from quite a very mixed family, which is an absolute blessing. Because I have 2 brothers and 4 sisters, but 1 or 2 of us share the same dad, and then 1 or 2 of us share the same mum. But it means that there's a lot of different sort of like looks in our family, ranging to obviously coloured to even white with red hair. So I feel like I've got quite a lot of experience in just being around a lot of mixed sort of backgrounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about what you do. Obviously, I know what you do.
Yeah.
This is for our audience.
So I had a brief military background when I was younger. And then I think my life sort of pushed me towards sort of like construction sort of side of things, because I've always had like more keenness to work with my hands and, you know, just be a bit more practical the way I work.
No pun intended.
And I have a lot of other interests, which is also allow me to make a little bit of an income as well, which is through dance. And from doing dance, I ended up keeping the passion of music and getting into DJing. Well, I've always been into sort of like DJing since I was younger, but I never really like took it on as an outside sort of project, so to speak. It was always just in the bedroom doing a little bit.
Do you think that, I would say that's probably how we met. Because you think if you didn't do the DJing, we'd have got the opportunity to meet?
Personally, I feel like we would have met because of the dance. I felt like ultimately it's dance.
It was dance that we had in common.
Yeah, and it's dance for me and myself that made like a massive impact in my life through sort of being able to establish my identity among people that have a similar sort of train of thought, I would say. Yeah.
Because it's actually mad how many sort of different career paths and sort of interests you've been through, because I always say this, you're someone who can do quite a lot of different things and you've had a lot of different experiences that are quite contrasting with each other, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, which I said sort of at the start, which sort of, I kind of pride myself on being sort of where someone can't predict me fully, but they think they know me, but
can't put you in a box.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah. That's how I really feel. I feel like you can kind of try and put me in a box, but there's always something that I'll throw out.
Yeah, always something that would surprise people about you. Yeah, I agree.
But it comes from, I say, again, from the mixed cultures that I've been a part of and the mixed backgrounds, sort of, because I was brought up by my mum, who's a Preston proper Lancashire lass. Which I pride myself on as well, because I've got a great side of family from that side.
Yeah.
And then I've also got my dad's side, which is so far removed from my mum's side. He's from a place called Choma, Zambia in Africa. And he was actually like raised over there, so he has that sort of cultural side to him. He's more in touch with that side of like the world than he would be this side of the world. So yeah, it's just allowed me to sort of different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I would say that's something that I most admire about you, is that you're always able to see from more than one perspective in a lot of things. I always feel like sometimes it's quite an unusual thing to have that. I haven't met a lot of people who can do that and see things from different ends of the story. Do you know what I mean?
But I feel like I put it down to, because in my childhood my mum remarried, so she split with my dad like very early on in my life, and then she eventually remarried to my sister's dad, my little sister's dad. And because he was in the army at the time, we sort of like moved around every 2 years. We'd have to get our stuff, pack up, move to a new place, and that would be like moving to a new school that was closer to the house we were living in, or so I felt earlier on I got to see so many walks of life very early, because you change school and then you see somebody, but you recognise that same characteristic in the next school in somebody else. Do you know what I mean? So you, for example, you get the class clown. There's always a similar sort of class clown in every school, and it's sort of like from an early age I sort of woke up to the fact that we're all very similar. Everybody has. I very much doubt there's one person in the world that can't find something, whether it's something so basic but a similar thing to another person in the world. Do you know what I mean?
I feel like we all at least have one thing in similarity to someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
How do you feel like looking from the outside, people stereotype you? If someone was to not know you and see you for the first time, what do you think people's stereotype and description of you is?
Well,
Assumptions.
I think all my life, obviously with me being half African, people just put me in the box of being an African and didn't take into the fact that I was actually raised by a white mum. Do you know what I mean? So I felt like I've always been put in that sort of box where, I don't know, they just sort of, the sort of stereotypes that you normally get.
So a lot of people think you are half African when they meet you then without asking?
Not until I speak. When I speak, I think that sort of gives away that with my broad accent.
Yeah, I was shocked when we first spoke. I was like, whoa, he's well pressed.
Yeah, but the fact that I'm quite dark for a mixed race lad, because I like the outdoors a lot, so I always.
We've got a really good tan. Yeah.
Not just that, as well as that, my dad's got quite a strong gene.
Yeah,
he's from.
He is very dark.
In sort of middle of Africa, so it's come through a bit more stronger. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I've always just felt like I've been put in some sort of box. But it's been a really long journey in the sense of I've had like this ups and downs with how many times with what you get put in the box for. So in certain areas, like I say, when I used to move around, you get put in a box, but it could be in a very positive light because of your colour. It would be like, oh well, you're good at this, and you're good at that, and do you know what I mean? And then I can move to another area 2 years later, and I was confused when it was put in like a really negative sort of sense where I go and call for somebody, and the mum's very off with me, and they won't let you in the house, but they're letting all the other friends in the area in the house. But I never understood at all why. I just I was just a bit like, oh well, but not knowing.
But not actually be like, did you know it was because you were mixed race at the time? Was that something you didn't see? Not
really, not until a lot older. I'm not saying a lot older, but I'm talking more sort of end of your primary school area. That's when I sort of started to put things together.
Yeah.
A little bit, like I felt it and heard conversations, but I always just thought of, well, it doesn't really happen to me sort of thing, because I never really, like I say, because I'm not a grudge holder, so when something happens, I like to deal with things straight away to the point where it's over as soon as it's happened.
Like you're over it very quickly.
Yeah. So when people used to call me names, I'd either confront them about it straight away, or just ignore it to the point like it didn't happen. Do you know what I mean? Sort of like.
Is this names that refer to you being mixed race?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, like I say, first couple of years, because it didn't happen in the household, it didn't get really explained, because it wasn't a part of our life to pick on somebody sort of, because we had different sort of races within the family.
Yeah.
I never really came across it before, so I got called some names that I really didn't understand. Obviously, I won't say them on here, but I didn't understand the meaning of them.
Oh, right.
To the point I'd repeat them back, and I'd call other people it, and they'd just be looking at me like, what?
I mean, we're happy for you to share if you feel like you want to.
I wouldn't really want to repeat them, but it took me a little while to realise that it was out of my hands whether or not somebody liked me or not. So I just felt like I constantly tried. But yeah, it just, it took me a little bit longer to realise, oh, it doesn't matter if I let them have all my sweets when we're playing. It doesn't matter if you do it. Do you know what I mean? It was just a simple fact of the colour of your skin that they couldn't connect for one reason or another.
Yeah. And so the house where you said like you'd knock on and then, you know, sort of their parents would be a bit like, oh, what do you think their impression was? What do you think what was that immediate thought?
I think ultimately, like now I'm older, I can see exactly what it would have been. It's their lack of interaction with somebody that looks different. Now today, in modern day today, like I love of where we're at with it, to be honest.
That's come a long way, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
I love how diverse everything is.
But sort of in the early 90s, or, you know, like mid-90s.
But it was still quite unusual to see coloured people.
So sometimes we would move to areas where I'd literally be the only coloured boy in the town and my sister would be the only coloured girl. And again, with that, when it happens, sort of racism happens to yourself, you feel a bit like it's only ever happening to yourself.
Yeah.
But now I'm older, I start to realise actually my mum, who was the white person in the family, who I thought didn't understand it, actually got more racism than what we did, because she was the white woman with the kids.
In what way? Like, tell us a little bit more about.
I mean, as in, sorry, she was sort of the white woman with black kids, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because she became a single parent at a stage. You could tell that she sort of was going through it as well, because people were judging her character, not knowing the full story about the relationship with my dad and stuff like this. And
what was the judgment there? What were the sort of things people would say?
But I don't know if it's more what people would say, but it's hard to put in.
Would you say like a certain behaviour?
Yeah, well, where I got that statement from is like I was having a conversation with her quite recent, you know, sort of over the COVID period when a lot of stuff about racism got brought to surface.
Yeah.
And then I could tell how deeply hurt my mum was, in the sense that, one, she felt like she had no powers to sort of stop what was happening to me. But at the same time, that was her culture that was doing that to me. Do you get what I mean? And when she first got with my dad, she's talked about stories where people looked down at her because she was into a coloured person. So she's had to deal with just the same as us, where if people would call us names, they would also call the white people that would hang around that would accept black people. So and I feel that goes away with friends as well. So it's one thing that never gets really highlighted about how, okay, there's people out there with a negative view of race and of people because they're scared of where they're from and they don't understand the culture. But there's a high percentage of people that have took a massive risk to be the odd one out in their own culture to allow other cultures to excel.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? My mum having to go through people not looking at her idealistically, because she's got kids from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
As I say, my little brother's got red hair, and you know what I mean. He's gorgeous, but he's a white lad with red hair. My little sister she's got blonde hair, and she looks quite completely different to us. But in the eyes, I think we've all got very similar eyes.
Yeah, everyone's got the almond shaped eyes.
But yeah, we've got quite a lot of different looks in the family. Like I say, my oldest brother is fully black.
Yeah.
There's only really me and our Emma that have got the same mum and dad, so we look very similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've just got like such a big melting pot, and then obviously now you're in the family as well. So.
I just came to like confuse everyone even more. But
even still with that, I think it took a long journey to be able to like, I don't know where I'm going with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the subject of us in terms of like our race and culture can branch off in like so many different ways, because I think we've been on our own personal journeys through race in terms of like learning about other people, but also learning about ourselves and how we've been in different environments as well. And our journey to like actually like finding each other, and then our journey while we've been together as well has been quite a big thing on its own. I mean, we often confuse people a lot, don't we? Like, it's very rare we would go in a public setting and not draw attention. And we feel it a couple of times, don't we? There's been a few times where we've walked into a room and it's like the whole room's just stopped and just turned, and we're like, but like you said, we forget that that's what it is from the outside. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's because you're good looking. No, but yeah, we do. We get a lot of like.
But the mix of us both, I think, is a bit like curious. Like you said, people can't quite put us in a box.
Yeah, I think when we're alone, like individual, people can sort of tell where we're both from. So when you're alone, people sort of know that you've got like either Indian, Pakistan sort of background. Yeah. With me, they can tell like sort of I'm mixed race. Yeah. But when we stand together, people are just like, what are they? Where are they from?
That's it.
You know, they just don't really know, especially with our accents.
I mean, individually, our accents throw people quite a lot, because it's that same thing of the stereotypically of imagine something else from the outside with us and already made a sort of conception of us. And then when we start speaking, we just throw all those paradigms out the window, because I was like, whoa, we need to like go from scratch, because I don't know who this person is now. It's not what I thought originally. But like you were saying earlier, when you was talking about sort of how mum steps out of sort of her culture a little bit and doing something different by, you know, marrying a coloured man. I feel like, I don't know if you feel the same, but that's difficult. That's like my situation as well, where I'm that person in my culture as well. 100%. It's very unusual to see, which is one of the reasons I think that it draws attention when we are out together, because it's a bit like, oh, he's brave.
Yeah, very much so.
Also, how did she get him? Woo!
No, I think it's the way around on that. But yeah, I feel like it's just because sort of our personalities, in the sense of what we've experienced, same sort of thing. People would assume you would be a certain way, but they don't realise that although you've got a family that's like, some of them are very cultural, and in the ways, in that sense, you've had a lot of influence from all the local people from your Accrington. You know what I mean?
Because it's the same situation as you. We're such a mixed bag. Our family, we're the same. We've got, you know, white skin. We've got half African, half Pakistani. We've got full Pakistani, and then the different culture of Pakistani as well. Like, it's such a mixed bag.
It is, but it has its ups and it has its downs. I think it only has its downs though. Same with anybody, because when people just try and put themselves in that one box, try and label themselves from one area. You know what I mean? Like, I have pride that I'm from Lancashire. Yeah. I even have pride at which school I went to at some sort of point. And then at the other side, I don't. Do you know what I mean?
That's the horror stories I've heard.
I know, but do you know what I mean? But like, you have it to a certain extent, but it shouldn't extend to the point where you are not trying to relate with somebody else just because you're from an area. You can still represent where you're from, but not have to exclude other people from anything that you're doing just because they're from somebody different. It doesn't make sense to me. And a lot of racism, I think that's because I am two different races. Could be possibly be more, you know, so you do one then genealogy and then you find out you've got 50. But, you know, like, what I'm aware of is obviously, like, my dad's from Africa, my mum's from England, and I can't really understand how you could take one side or the other. So,
but then again, it's people's perspective and like perception from where their own upbringing, their own culture. I suppose they see through those eyes.
Well, for me, I think because I've had such a lucky, well, I wouldn't say lucky, but yeah, lucky sort of point of view of life, because I'm from such a mixed bag. There's benefits. And there's so much great stuff in all things. And it's even extends to the point of, like, marrying you, I didn't have really much of a clue in the sense of how an Asian family interacted personally. Although I've had like a lot of experience in that sort of culture through the military background and stuff, but it's a completely different side. You didn't get the personal side of things. And I remember it was just like meeting your auntie for the first time, and I walked into the garden, but she had like a headscarf on, and I was panicking a little bit, thinking, oh, what do I say? What do I do? Because it was just so alien to me to be able to just speak to
And we're sort of a confusing
woman from
family
that
as
culture.
it is, yeah, in terms of like culture.
But and then when the moment she turned around, I was just like, oh my God, this is my mum, but just wearing something different.
Yeah.
As I mean, in the personality, the joke, she just ripped me what I was wearing. It's just exactly what my mum would have been doing.
Which auntie was it? So I have like, my mum's one of 7, so there's a lot of aunties.
I think it was Antonisa, wasn't it? I think
Probably.
Antonisa when she came down.
We've all got that bit of sarcasm it runs in the family.
To the point, I think she even told me like, "Oh, you need to have a little bit of trim of your beard," and she was telling Kessa, your cousin Kessa, at the same time, like, "You need to shave your beard." But it was just like it was nothing different. You get what I mean? Like, so I sort of painted up in my head to.
Did you think we were going to be quite? Because your impression of me before we actually really got to know each other, I think you presumed that it came from quite a strict background because that's how you had known it, which, you know, to an extent you weren't wrong. There was definitely, I'm not going to say strictness, I'm going to say there was definitely like a lot of cultural barriers that hadn't been broken down at that point. Because you've seen me sort of go from the cage to freeing out of it a little bit, you know, but then it was confusing because there was some cultural barriers I was surprisingly out of, you know, with dance and stuff. So I think you then had a bit of an incline of like, oh, yeah, well, this is unusual. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the moment I noticed who you were, I was definitely confused to how he was going to be. Yeah. Because you, like you say, you had that dance sort of profile on social media.
Yeah.
But then every now and then, I think it's because you was doing photo shoots and stuff, but you was doing more cultural sort of photo shoots, like you was wearing Asian wedding dresses and things. So I was just sort of like,
oh, it was just a specific type of muslin that was big at the time. Yeah.
I just didn't know like the ins and outs until we got to like talking and things. I was just I was just a bit more curious to be like, how are you doing this? But you're like that.
Yeah.
Because like I say, it's
different to what you knew.
Yeah, because it's quite often you see people who always pick one side of the fence. But like I said earlier on, I've never wanted just to pick one side of the fence.
I think that's something we have.
Yeah, in common.
Yeah.
Because I never just want to be labelled as just from here.
Yeah,
and it's not because I'm not proud of being from there. I'm extremely proud. I'm extremely proud of my dad's side in Africa. Do you know what I mean? I actually love the fact that there's family and such a history.
Yeah.
Which I find, obviously, you know, I find so interesting. Yeah. But I also love the history from where I'm from.
Yeah.
As my wife will tell you, I'm a bit of a, I wouldn't say like a geek, but I like to.
It has a surprisingly like, and I wouldn't have known this about you when I first met you, but it's everything I love about you is really, you're really into your history. Like, we can be walking through a new town and Adam will just be like, back in 1966, this is what they used to do. And I'd just be like, oh, right. And before I know it, I've had a whole history lesson in like walking from one side of a place to another. But then at the same time, I feel like it's made our trip so much more fun and interesting.
Yeah, but I think it's because of the same thing. I find people interesting.
Yeah. And I think you find like other sort of experiences that other people might have gone through and how it shapes them. I think you've always been very open to being interested in that and learning about people and places.
I think my interest is in it because I've always felt that there's something not quite sort of right. So when we was growing up, and obviously the way that we was taught history at school.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Some things just didn't really like make too much sense of like how they did things and stuff. Like, for example, there was inventors that was always like rewarded because of how much stuff they invented, but these products was always like a cleaning based product, when obviously they wouldn't have been doing cleaning at this stage of history. They would have had slaves doing that. So you sort of wonder, well, how would they have invented like the mop, for example, or the broom, for example, because they wasn't using them apparatus at the time. But it's just little tiny things in history have sort of been like, oh, okay.
Let's dive more into that. I know you've got loads more there. No, but I think it's important because I feel like since you've got to know this information, although you're at a point where you're embracing the African side of you more, because I want to come to that in a bit as well, because there has been a turning point of you embracing it more than you had done before. And I feel like what you've learned about history in terms of Black people and Black history and Black culture, and celebrating that more, and what Black people did bring to our world that maybe they weren't acknowledged for originally. I feel like it is a big thing, because I feel like that's what's really made a lot of people start to question history now and what it is we are being taught. How, babe, you know me. Get straight into the good stuff.
Well, I don't know if I can give you good stuff. No, it's just like,
for example, like what you've known about, with Egyptians and stuff, and it's not saying, these are facts and stuff, but this is like research that we've had a look at, and there's a bit of a different view on it to what we had known.
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example of something more modern. Well, it's not more modern to us, but yeah, it's a bit more modern than that. But I found out recently, and I'm talking within the past month, like I seen this thing where they was talking about Elvis's career, Elvis Presley, but how he stole like a lot of songs, and it was a lot of them were written off a black guy. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but it was basically his whole style and everything was sort of taken. But in the same sense, the other side to me, which I really strongly sort of wanted to say today, was because there's a big thing on like the so-called culture vulture sort of thing, but it's also really helped, as much as individuals haven't been credited for things, as in that culture, but eventually everything's always comes to the surface no matter what. Some things take a couple of months to come to the surface, some things will take generations, take years. But I feel like them things have always sort of bridged the gap a little bit. When a style has been taken, it's the same thing of, did that person just take the style, or are they really, or do they just appreciate it as well? Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Another example sort of to do with music is Eminem. Growing up, I loved a lot of his songs, but not as much as my white friends. And I couldn't understand whenever I played other hip hop songs, they would have been like, they didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, Eminem was like sort of a breakthrough. Of actually seeing a white rapper who was so talented, I think, and I think it sort of shocked the industry a little bit, didn't it, to see something like that for the first time?
It was, but one thing I couldn't understand is, so I always get into the debate of how come you only like Eminem, but you don't like the other rappers that even Eminem were bringing through, like from D12, and the often excuse was they couldn't relate. And I was just like, but what is it you can't relate to? Because I felt like deep down I probably could have related to Eminem a lot more than what some of my friends could have done. The only difference being was the tone of his skin.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? Because he lived in an area where it was predominantly black, and he was one of the only white people. It was sort of the reverse from myself.
Yeah.
But I also like the sound of other artists. Like I loved, like at the time of when Eminem were coming out, but like Snoop Dogg was like really in his prime. You had Dr. Dre and all these others, but they wouldn't let her listen to them. And I used to always be puzzled. But now I'm older, I really appreciate that time period when they would only listen to Eminem, because now a lot of these people that I were at school with at the time, they listen to all types of hip hop, all types of music. It just took them a lot longer because they had to find something with a bit of similarity in there.
Do you feel like as we have grown, definitely everything, it has become more open? Do you think, as in we embrace more culture now than we used to back then, do you think that that process has allowed people to dip into other cultures without feeling a certain way about it, or maybe feeling like they couldn't before? When you're saying, what do you feel like has changed that in your friends, where now they listen to a lot of different things?
I think it was similar to going back to when I was talking about my mum earlier on, was it took the brave people like that, that was in the other side of the culture, but they refused to see prejudice, they refused to see indifference.
Yeah.
Like a couple of my close friends, they loved the black side of culture more than their white side of the culture, but they're white. But it's taken them people that really barely get the credit because they're the ones that have bridged the gap.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I know for a fact that some of my friends have been confronted by other white lads to be like, "Why are you hanging around with him for?" Or even getting accused of, people saying stuff like, "Oh, you think you're black?"
Yeah.
To my white friends, just because they've took interest in something I'm doing.
It's more common, that line, than people think. And I think for those that have been told that before, it happens a lot.
To me, they're the bravest people. They're the people that have changed most things. I truly feel like that way. It's when I see these Instagram stories of like coloured girls having a go at white girls for just like hairstyles and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
the
it
way
happens to one
they're
of my
dressing
friends
and the bodies and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, but if you go back to the 90s, you was getting ridiculed for your style. Why aren't you happy that they're embracing it so much that they're doing it themselves?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you feel so strongly that it's come from your culture, it will look better on you. So why are you worried? Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. I can't help but think this as well, but do you think, because I feel like it, in culture, it can go two ways. I think sometimes it can be like, oh, they're embracing that. Like, thank you for actually embracing my culture and wanting to learn more about it. And then sometimes I think it can be like, that's how I identify myself. That's mine. And I think, especially for a lot of black people who have sort of had to go through a lot of hardship, I can't help but think there's that, because I feel like sometimes it can be the same in Pakistani culture as well, where it's like, but that's ours, and they fought so hard for it to be theirs that it's almost like they don't want anything else to be taken away a little bit. Just looking at it from two perspectives. Sometimes I feel like it can be a bit like, but that's just ours. Like, it's the one thing we can say that's ours. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but this is where I believe that like people don't know enough about other cultures to claim something as just theirs.
Yeah, that's it. And this is where you start to see all the blurred lines between stuff now, don't you? Is where you think something's from one place because that's what we've been told, but we never 100% know.
Like a big thing for us is we love Vikings. After
I've
the show,
learned to love Vikings, but I actually love it now.
Had this sort of weird thing, and maybe it's because of my mum's side. I think with fiery red hair and stuff, she might have been a part of that side, but something still took my interest. But one thing I always remember is that they were one of the first people that like invented the comb, and a lot of the culture in that sense had dreadlocks. But these were white-skinned people. But even though it's just because of the time of the era, a lot of people weren't brushing their hair, so it just got matted. So they ended up, and then they styled their hair in a way where it was manageable or it looked better, but it'd still be a dreadlock form until the Vikings created this comb. And it was just finding things out like that. Like, I found out that Indian people at one stage had dreadlocks because of the same thing. The hair eventually just got matted. Before a time of cutting your hair, it just got matted. The Egyptians had dreadlocks. To be honest, I didn't understand what was on their head because of the statues. I was like, is it snakes? Like, I just really didn't have a clue when I was a kid. And then now I'm older and it's like, she's got braids. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not just their thing. I think it's just because different cultures developed and moved from that for so many generations. We just identify certain areas of having certain things or certain ways of doing things. But it's not when you really look into just something so simple, you realise that, oh, that could have actually moved place. And they still do that, but they didn't create it. It was created somewhere so completely random.
That's it.
So I feel like although people would love to like claim things as theirs, I feel like it's just because they're scared of not having an identity.
That's it. I think that's what it comes down to, is that it's just that belonging gives people sort of a little bit of safety and reassurance and feeling like, I think we've so built it now of, rather than thinking like the earth is all ours, we've sort of been so built and born in a time where everything's been separated off, and you know, even where the countries are and having borders, and you know, we forget actually that you can't really say like this is a certain way and these are people that do this, this and this, because there's always going to be a mix everywhere now. And I think that's what we're finding now, is that you can't really actually put many people in a box anymore. It's like we are so open and starting to merge together now more.
Yeah, and that's
not everywhere, but it's definitely better than it was.
And that's what I sort of realised, especially since sort of maturing past, like into my 30s and being married to yourself. I now identify as like not in the box, and I'm happy with not being, because I used to always look for sort of belonging as well.
Yeah.
In the sense of I always wanted to be a part of something. I think that was what ultimately made me want to be in the army, because I just wanted that whole like pride and I'm from this. But wherever I were, I never felt fully settled.
Yeah.
Until I come to the realization that I'm not from one thing, so I'm not going to just find acceptance in the one area or the one space.
Yeah.
For me, first of all, I just need to accept myself and the things that I'm interested in, and just do them things. And now I've found belonging because, like yourself, I found you. You're very similar. I found a lot of friends that are very similar.
Yeah.
You know, like
you hit the nail on the head there. Is like accepting yourself, because I think we try and find home in so many external things when we don't realize like home's just in us, and that it doesn't have to be a certain way. Do you know what I mean? So just accepting yourself is a big thing to having like an identity. Is you just need to look in yourself for that. No one else is ever going to be able to do that for you.
Exactly. That's all I would ever want. I wouldn't everybody ever want to be placed in sort of, like I say, as an identity. I just want people to say, "Oh, he's a nice lad."
Might just be a good person.
Yeah, just to sort of, or if they work with me, oh, he's very professional.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. And I think everybody should sort of look at themselves more individually than more trying to cling on to something, whether it be, because wherever you go, and no matter how you get into it, there's always a group after a group after a group. What I mean is, you go abroad and all of a sudden you're English and you're dead proud, and you'll talk to any random English person because we're English. And then you get here, you won't speak to them because you're Lancashire. You know what I mean? And you won't speak to someone else because you're from Lancashire.
Yeah.
And then like it goes down to, well, I'm not speaking to that Lancashire lad because he's not from my hometown. Once you're in Lancashire.
And then you have different ends of that town as well. It's like, here we have a bottom end, top end. I know you were saying the same.
And it's just a constant thing of where people will always
separate.
Yeah, they'll always separate, always put themselves in groups and groups and groups. And if you go small as you like or as big as you like. But I also feel like it's a pointless thing.
Yeah.
A very pointless thing because you're missing so much by putting yourself in one place.
100%.
You're not going to get the opportunity to experience so much things. Like in the modern day of today, where you could just fly to most countries, you could just be on the internet looking at most things.
Yeah.
We live in such a great place where you could have so much information at your fingertips and just make life more tailored to you as a person. But if you start holding yourself like in a cultural barrier, and I could only do things a certain way, or I could only eat things a certain way, you're doing it for nobody else really, apart from a bit of land or something that can be just taken away. But
do you think people need something to follow sometimes? What do you think the world would be like if we didn't have religion and we didn't have any sort of guidance or something to follow?
Me personally, I felt like it was great in a time before we had the ability to communicate and pass information on as fast as we do. And because a lot of people have access to information. I mean, you know, my thoughts already sort of on religion, and I'm one of these sort of, I do and I don't, because I just don't know.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because it's sort of
something because I just don't know.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. If you don't have a certain opinion on it,
I really don't. Like, I really understand and appreciate like the teachings that are needed through things like this to teach people rights and wrongs. Because when my experience, when obviously with being a part of a lot of different people, there's a lot of religions and cultures. Ultimately, the key things are all the same. You know, it's just like treat people nicely. Don't harm people. You know what I mean? Treat people how you want to be treated.
Yeah.
If you look at just the very, very basics of life and stuff, and I felt like that's what it was there for. I think it's a good tool to reflect on, but not as something that you should just then only put yourself around the people like that, because you might miss a good teaching or a blessing from something else.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel like you end up not finding out all of those other parts of yourself when you sort of restrict yourself in that way, because you're only being a certain way. But sometimes, I know for me, it made me question whether that was actually me. And I think since I've decided to not just follow sort of one path, I found so many other things about myself that I don't feel like I would have known had I, say, for example, like just followed a religion and only done that.
Yeah.
Not opened my eyes to other things, because that wasn't everything that I was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes like it's hard, because I think like it's a bit like having a government. It's like, I can understand from both sides why we need like rules, regulations, some sort of system and order. Though I feel like sometimes it's gone way past that now, where it's just more of a control thing. But then I also wonder what it would be like if we'd all just accepted one another for what it were and been able to still live without needing a leader or all these sort of structures. Do you know what I mean? I suppose it's a little bit the same with like culture and race and stuff, is that I don't know if it brings some sort of order to things.
Yeah, it does. Like I said, I think it was needed. And the same things like today, some things are needed. As much as we don't like them, the government do need to tax us. I agree with that, because if you look at countries that don't get taxed, you have really, really rich people there and really, really poor people.
Yeah.
Taxes to help bridge the gap a little bit.
Yeah.
We don't always agree what they're spending on.
No.
And how it's moved and stuff, but the very fundamentals of what it's there for and how it does help. Maybe not as many people as we would like it to help.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're stirring up loads of opinions here.
I know. No, I don't. No, because obviously I'm not like a pro-government person or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I'm a practical person.
Yeah.
In the sense of, like, see it for what it is, not how you feel about it, but just for what it is. Like, I've never, luckily, needed the benefit system myself. But I've also, well, apart from when, actually, I would have done, because as a kid, my mum needed it for a period of time. So I've always seen the sense of, well, yeah, people do need it.
Yeah.
That wasn't expecting a situation. I mean, she had like a mortgage and
I've always said that about,
and stuff, but she just, things changed.
Yeah. I always say that about like our country, is that, you know, yeah, we pay a lot, and yeah, there are some things I think that are unnecessary, but I feel like at the same time that it's amazing that, say, for example, people with disabilities who generally are like struggling and need that help. Like, I think it's absolutely amazing that we have a system here that caters to that.
100%.
Things like the NHS, and we have systems in place that we are so blessed to have. I mean, healthcare is a massive thing. A lot of people know that in other countries, that it's a huge thing to have that so accessible here. And it's hard, isn't it? You're never going to please everyone, and not everyone's going to be happy with absolutely everything all the time, but you have to count your blessings with what we are provided with. Yeah. Because you can always be much, much more worse off.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I just try to do these days, boys. Like, count your blessings from whatever side of interaction or whatever background you've got or where you're from. You know, it's just, I feel like if you look at life that way, it definitely changes just your view on everything. You know, and how you treat people or what you expect from people.
Yeah.
Might go down a little bit if you could just sort of empathise and understand people, or not just realise, like, it's the same if we go sort of back to racism. I've kind of, like I say, when I was in childhood, there was a stage where I'd even let certain friends call me like mad names, but in the sense of banter.
Do you know, it's weird, because this came up in the last podcast that I did, and I was speaking about that. Tell me more.
Well, it's because of that whole, if you can't beat them, you know, like, joining sort of thing. Of like, I don't know, I sort of lost my train of thought there. So.
You were saying you was going back to talking about racism and like how you would allow people to talk to you. Were you trying to say anything about sort of trying to make it sort of an acceptance? What I was saying about it, because it did come up in terms of like it being a banter thing, and for me now, because I've spoken to you about this before, where I have let people say certain things to me before. I mean, the sort of person that's been called like a terrorist and stuff before, or just labelled with the same labels of people have, like, which is ridiculous, isn't it? But I was just saying how after a bit, and I realised like how demeaning it were, and I was just allowing it to carry on by not actually speaking up and saying something. Whereas if someone tried to banter with something like that with me now, because you know what I'm like with stuff like that now, especially with the work I do now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I shut it down like immediately now, because I never want that to become a bantery thing to be able to do. I do understand it from the other point of like trying to sort of like mal down the insult a little bit, but go on, you go.
Yeah,
the light bulb's gone off.
What I was trying to mean is like I feel like a lot of people's it's like their lack of experience and education with it. There's a alarm going off.
There is someone's alarm going off. You're watching this podcast, it might be you. Please switch your alarm off.
Could be mine.
I've been holding this cup like this, not realising it looks like the panda's drinking this Costa the entire time we've been talking. And welcome back.
Cheers.
So we were saying...
Yeah, so I feel like people have had just like a lack of...
just inflated.
I know, yeah, my jacket. I feel like people have had a lack of education, just and experience of being around other people and how to deal with that. Like I was trying to put out is, so how I dealt with it as a kid is I used to just usually can't beat them, join them. So when they called me names, I say the names back to them, to the point where I really said them so it didn't bother me. Back to them, even let them say it in sort of banter and in jest.
And did it feel like banter?
It felt like when it first started, it didn't. But I felt like I took that away from them by kind of like joining them.
Yeah, I get what you mean. You sort of wouldn't allow them to make it a negative connotation, so they couldn't get you with that.
Yeah. But and then it goes back into the same sort of sense of like, it's only when I got older that I got the sort of pride of my African side. Because I used to always use the sort of excuse of, well, I'm mixed, I'm half white, so do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, tell us more about that, because I did want to talk about that and sort of where you feel like the turning point of like embracing all of you was.
I think the turning point was when I got put in the box that many times. I just sort of went to one side of the culture and then back to the other side and back to the other side sort of thing. And then I think the only real realisation that I had to just accept that I'm not from any box, I'm a part of a bigger picture, was when I received racism from all different races.
Yeah.
So at one stage I was told of a lot of group of older black lads. Well, they sort of questioned me, they pulled me out on a night out once, and I was in the army, and it was like, when you look in the mirror, what do you see? Do you see a black man or a white man? Because couldn't understand why I was always with the white lads from camp. But them lads are just generally got on with them better because they was growing up in areas that I was growing up in.
So is this fully coloured people asking you this?
Yeah, the coloured lads on the camp that were like from places like Fiji, from the Caribbean, from Africa. There's a big group of them, and they pulled me aside one day when I've been on a night out with all my white English mates who were more actually like me as a personality-wise. And they were a bit like miffed us in like, why do you just chill with them and not us sort of thing. But and then when I did real chill with them, they always made me feel like I wasn't black enough because I didn't understand their culture as much as what they did, because they'd just been brought up around that. And it even extends to obviously where we've experienced it through family issues of, oh, you shouldn't be with that person. Do you know what I mean? And
I mean, that's a whole podcast on its own.
I've obviously experienced it from white people. I've experienced it even once from Chinese people. So it was like, I felt like no matter what, you're already then going to be good enough for somebody. So just make sure you're good enough for yourself.
Yeah, that's it.
You know what I mean?
You've always been this positive.
I think I was forced just into this way of thinking and having my own back because of how many times I tried to get close to it, but I never. There was something I missed. There's some always.
Yeah.
But because it happened from an early age, I just managed to like deal with it and move on. Do you get what I mean?
Like you were saying before, like you're very much like that anyway.
Yeah, I think sometimes I make it my mission. If I find somebody doesn't like somebody culturally, I'll make it my mission to make them like it. And
tell us about because I've seen an example of you actually doing this, and it's so strange how people just knew you were the right person for it as well. But I just want to highlight it and talk about it. But just tell us about when we went to Ireland and we were doing the performance, and it was, I mean, the whole point of the trip that we was on was to bring diversity and sort of vibrance to towns that didn't really get to experience that a lot. And so we would go and plan performances and do like a carnival to brighten up and sort of open up that town. But we would all come from different cultures and places and sort of workshop with each other and embrace each other's sort of differences and then bring that all into sort of a unity performance. But I remember we had a bit of an incident went there with a guy who
someone was like shouting abuse towards a lot of the members, weren't they, when they were performing?
But I just thought the way that you dealt with it in terms of
because of my experience, I felt like I could easily not sort of mimic people, but put myself in their headspace.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. I've learned that from you.
It's just the same thing because I've moved around a lot. I can see what trigger some people, and I can see what people kind of respect. They might not respect modern authority, but they'll respect somebody. I always say it's the same like criminals and stuff. They won't listen to the police, but they'll listen to that lad in the cell that's harder than them. You know what I mean? As in like fighting wise or whatever it is. I'm not going to condemn any of that. But this particular incident, this guy was just shouting abuse and he really didn't get what people were trying to do, and he was shouting racist remarks towards the people that were there. But I don't think he actually clocked myself or Rio as well in the sort of the group. I didn't think we were a part of them until he realised when we confronted him that we were part of him. But I think what settled it is I didn't confront him in sort of like an irate way.
Well, no, this is what I loved about it, is you didn't need to.
Yeah, I just talked to him like he talked, as in because he was from the streets. I just sort of made him understand that I understand the streets, not in sort of like an aggressive way. I just possibly used a bit more slang or...
Yeah, I mean, what I loved is that you didn't need to do it in an aggressive way to get your point across. And I remember we were just looking from the outside and we just saw the transition of what was a really angry man to someone who actually was enjoying what we were doing in the end. And it was really crazy.
Yeah.
How you managed to do that in like a few minutes of a conversation.
It was just the same thing. I just give myself a second to think, why is he angry? What's he not understanding?
Yeah.
He was angry because he didn't understand why people were there, enjoying themselves, making other people watch him, enjoying themselves. He just didn't understand.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I could tell he wanted to be a part of it. He wanted to be recognised. But because he didn't have anything that he was proud of, in the sense of himself, he was just angry about the other people sort of having talents and being there. He didn't understand the cultures, like I say, until he had an opinion like maybe we didn't want him around, until I went up and put my arm around him and just said, "Hey, pal, what are you getting annoyed for? Do you know what I mean? Come and watch us. Come and see what we're doing. We're trying to help people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We've come over here to celebrate your beautiful city." And I think that was the point where he realised, he's like, oh, he weren't going to get the argument that he was sort of looking for. He wasn't going to get the reaction. He knew he didn't bother us at that point. We weren't bothered by his presence. We're bothered why he's not enjoying himself. So, and then once he came over, I just, it just went from sort of there.
Yeah.
But I think it's the same with most people. They only shout stuff or give you abuse just because either they're not happy with themselves, something that's gone wrong with their own self, or they just really don't understand what's happening.
Yeah, because for someone, because you're very tall, you can easily be quite intimidating to people if that's the way you wanted to approach it. You know in yourself, like you could bring that across to people. But I just love the fact that you have that, but you never need to use it because you have such a different way of doing that.
I think as well, though, it's through experience, isn't it? When I was younger, I'd probably been more inclined to use that
you
sort
use
of
what
size.
you have at the time.
That sort of, but again, it was never because of like the right judgment. It never led to anything positive. Even afterwards, you can win a battle, but you still got to then go walk away and sit and think about what just happened. Why did that interaction? Why did I have to do that to another person or shout at another? You know what I mean? Have that argument or whatever. And I think now I'm a bit older. I just understand that most of us are hurt from something that could have happened when you were a little kid. And
you never know where it's come from.
Yeah, and just like myself, as I don't want people to think that they could just read me like a book because they really don't know what's happened in the background. They don't understand, like, as I mentioned, my brother, but I didn't mention he was also disabled. You know what I mean? It's like there's layers to everybody.
Yeah.
And there's reasons why people have certain opinions. So it's just about taking time to put yourself in their shoes and ask the questions.
Everyone just wants to be heard, I think, ultimately. It's like, people just want to be heard. And
I think that was the guy in Ireland. He wanted to be a part of the show. And because he didn't find a way for him to fit in, he just wanted to be heard. So he just shouted abuse because that's all he had to offer at the time. But when we was like, no, you could come in, like, sort of chill, like, come sit in the background and watch it, sit with the dancers. And then all of a sudden he was just like, what, you actually want me over there? You know, and it's just that whole understanding of, like, we all are people, no matter where you're from, aren't you? And we need certain qualities. We all want some sort of acceptance. Or just not the acceptance. I think we all just want the same opportunities.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. You don't want to feel like you have less opportunity just because you're from a certain place or you've gone through a certain way. And, you know, people may already have complexes about that from their own upbringing. You know what I mean? We've both definitely had times where we felt like sort of unworthy of, you know, being able to have some things. And I think we've been able to start growing past that now where we're like in the same opportunities and as everyone else.
Yeah,
I mean,
because
just as worthy as it is anyone else.
Because sometimes not being able to have something leads to something greater. And as much as cliche as they say that, it really does, like, happen. You know what I mean? But it just depends on how you look at your own life. You know, you can see getting up in the morning as a really mundane thing and, oh, why do I have to do it? But until you're around people that don't have the ability to just get up and walk out of bed in the morning, once you've had that experience, you start to appreciate just the simple things like getting up in the morning.
That's
being able to go to the kettle.
Yeah.
I mean, we're quite...
not that one.
Yeah, well, we're so... yeah, you do. But we're really fortunate in the sense of, like, we have disabilities in the family as well. We have your sister, your amazing sister, who teaches us so much about humility and stuff.
That was one similarity between us that I don't know if we expected it actually with each other. It was something once we started speaking that we discovered about each other, and the simultaneous life we seemed to be like leading alongside each other was just really crazy how much we had in common and how much easier it made it because we just understood.
Yeah.
Like, I may, and I have to be honest about it as well, is that we may not have understood each other if one of us didn't have a disabled person in the family, the other may not have been able to understand that. Because I always say this, is that I think until you've stood in those shoes, you can never truly understand. And I think it's a frustration to some people sometimes. For example, this is probably the most common one I've heard from people that I speak to, is they're always really upset that they don't feel fully understood when something bad happens to them, like they're going through grievance or lost something or someone. And I always say to that person, I went through that, and I was that person who was really offended and felt so frustrated that no one could understand. When my grandma passed away, the deep hurt I was feeling, I shut down to the point where I didn't speak to anyone for, like, I think it was 3 to 4 months before I actually messaged anybody, because I just thought, well, I'm on my own with this. And then now looking back, unless someone else had actually lost their grandma and was as close to them as what I felt like I was with mine, then they wouldn't be able to understand, because I've never actually been in those shoes and experienced that before. So how could I have ever expected them to understand that? And that's something that I feel like I've learned that's really broadened my mind now, is that is just what it is.
Yeah, like I've often said that to yourself, or even myself, where, like,
yeah, you remind me.
Yeah, when sometimes will be out and about with your sister, and you will not get the interaction that you kind of expect. It's like they didn't have any sort of like thought process of somebody being around or how they've interacted with your sister. But and then like I said, sometimes because you've took it a bit more personally because it's close to home,
and that's something I've had
I have to remind you that we've got
things personally.
the experience around people like that that's able to help us understand that situation. And it's only until people have the experience with people. And it goes hand in hand the same with the sort of racism side. You can't really expect two walks of life to just immediately like get on with each other without having spent time with each other. They're just going to make their own opinions on both sides of how they're both living until they've actually had an interaction and gone, oh, actually we're wrong. Whereas I feel like I've always been in a blessed situation, just in the middle of everything, where I've never had to really think that way.
Yeah.
Because it's just obvious to me that both sides are very similar, because my mum can be very similar to my dad, and my dad was raised from the other side of the planet to my mum, and he's a different opposite sex to my mum, but there's certain things they'll both do and this is the same as each other. Do you get what I mean? Or their experience from both their parents has been very similar to each other, to the point which probably led them to get together in the first place. You know?
I mean, same with us.
Yeah, same
like
with
literally
us.
The same.
When we sort of met and went through everything on paper, we basically had the same life. Going all the way up, do you know? And it was like,
because I mean, even with the mixed race thing, like, even though I'm not mixed race, I can relate and understand, because what I had was mixed culture, which was quite similar in a ways, because I mean, I used to get called a coconut a lot, which was like I was brown on the outside and a white person on the inside, or a Malteser. I mean, there'll be some people from Accrington that can actually have been called this themselves as well, and it used to be sort of like a bit of a joke. Sometimes we were like, oh, do you get called a Malteser as well? And it was just because like we're brought up in a British lifestyle, but being told that I needed to be Pakistani. I was like, but I'm in Britain. No, be Pakistani, but live in Britain. Do you know what I mean? And so, but my point is that it was actually, even though they're quite different experiences, it ended up bringing sort of the same understanding from us both and same, do you know what I mean, outcome from it, because weren't necessarily mixed race, but the experience was very similar in some ways. I've been told I'm a white wannabe so many times growing up, like a lot.
Was that more from the Asian sort of background than?
Oh yeah, more from Pakistani people. Yeah. Whereas because I was surrounded by a lot of white friends, just in general, I think because I didn't get as much judgment from them, I ended up hanging around with them more, because I did get a lot of judgment from Pakistani people. Only really had one Pakistani friend that's been my best friend, who has always just accepted me as a person, and not what I am on the outside to everyone else, which is why we've always been best friends. And
but it's the same thing. It's them people again, even though she's still in the culture, but she's helped bridge the gap. The people like that should really get credit, rather than people being like, oh, this happened, or these people did this to us in this generation, which is way far removed from it. We should be looking at like the people that actually like bridged the gap. You know what I mean? The people that really didn't care. It's like my friend Jamie. He used to get called so many times. Every time I was with him, he used to call him. Can you say wigger? I don't know.
Yeah, it's my podcast.
Yeah,
of course we can.
Well,
we're authentic on
here. or like I say, like a black wannabe and that, and he didn't care.
I have never heard that one before.
Yeah,
that's a new one for me.
But he didn't care. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you could tell at some points it would have hurt him, but he probably knew in himself, like, he enjoyed what he was doing more than he would have enjoyed being accepted by them types of people.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? So so I just really appreciate all of my types of friends that like embrace that side. The mates like Harry and that, where I could just listen to music with them, even though they're not the same skin colour, but when I was in my early teens, I really couldn't listen to the same music as my friends. I used to have to listen to William Beer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's all they'd listen to. And if I put anything else on, they'd be like, "Oh, you trying to be a gangster?" And they'd be like, "No, I just really like hip hop."
Yeah.
But again, they used to listen to Eminem, and I didn't get it until I got a bit older. Then I'm like absolutely so thankful that he came along and did hip hop.
Yeah.
Because I remember at the time when he came out, even all the hip hop artists was like, "Who does he think he is? Robbing our culture and all this lot." And then even felt like a bit towards that myself, even though I didn't even understand any of it. I was like, yeah, you know, as you do. But and then like start listening to his albums and going, oh, this is belting, but this track also sounds a bit like this other track. And then I show it to my mate and then look at the colour of the person and be like, no, I don't want it.
How many times has that happened though? You've done it to me, where I've come in and you've been like, listen to this song and tell me if you think like this person's like black or white. And what it's been,
It's so
you know what I mean? I'm not saying there's just black and white, there's other colours as well, but and you automatically play half an impression already. So I'd be like, oh, it's definitely a black person, and you'd be like, show me, and it's like a white guy
or
with tattoos, or a white woman. Yeah, sometimes
yeah,
in a totally different gender to what I thought. And it just goes to show, but I love when you do that because it's just to show like there's people breaking the paradigm here that like are saying you can't do the stereotypes as much anymore.
Because if you do that, we're going to miss out on so much.
So much, yeah.
So much. It's like my personal opinion of like dancers, where people always say, oh, black people are the best dancers in the world and stuff.
Yeah.
In my personal opinion, I'd probably say it's more like the Polish people that are better dancers of the world and at this stage in what we do.
Yeah.
But then other people be like, but they've took the culture, and then it's like, yeah, but what they've done with it?
Yeah.
Now, if you really love what your culture brought to the table, you've got to appreciate this because of you understand the thought process it takes. You know what I mean? And the ability it takes to be able to make something like that.
Yeah.
So it really like sort of angers me when I see this people like trying to claim things as just theirs and theirs only.
It's definitely become like a pet hate of mine now, where I'm just like, it's not for anyone's to claim. Like nothing is for anyone to claim. We've all come here with the same entitlement, and I suppose it depends on how you look at it. Like we look at it now as like we're all humans in one place, not even like a division of places. Like we're all humans on one planet, and it's just perspective of like zooming out and looking at what we actually are, and we all contribute to the world. So when people are like, oh, the world's this sort of place, it was like, well, you're part of that. So what can people start to do now to not make it like that? Because we're all contribute to the planet, whether people are aware of it or not, or conscious of that or not. We're the ones that create the division.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
no one else created them.
Yeah.
Whether we were leading that or we chose to go along with that, like you said, those people bridging the gaps are the ones that have started to take away those borders a little bit.
Definitely. Some people, I remember hearing something like many years ago where someone was like, it will take aliens to invade Earth for all of humanity to realise that we're all humans.
Do you know what? Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It'd take a whole different species.
Yeah.
And then all the humans would come together and forget that there was any sort of separation in the first place.
Exactly, but it's that simple. Obviously, it's a bit extreme, but at the same time, it's not, because that's all it is. It's that whole like division. It's just a thought process. You're not much different to anybody else. You might have like curly hair and they've got straight hair, but it's not. There's not much differences. Do you know what I mean? In people when they really look down on things, you know, like really look at things. And I felt that through my life. I've just been able to see that a lot, you know, really a lot, and I really like it. That the fact of it's not just myself that's a mixed bag. There's so many mixed bags everywhere.
Yeah. Out of all the places you moved, where would you say you felt like who you were was like accepted the most?
Well, this is the thing, because I didn't know who I was. So as in like, do you mean as in like?
As in being mixed race.
As in being mixed race.
So was there ever a place where you forgot you was even mixed race because it wasn't even highlighted?
Not really. I mean, when I was young, when I was a kid and stuff, and you just move around, like, I mean, talking about the early ages, like 3 to 4 and stuff. You don't
before
really
you start
know.
to realise that
you don't really know. I mean, there's some areas where, like, it could be like a town like Chorley in Preston, for example. Like, I was born in Preston, but I spent a lot of my childhood in Chorley. So from the age of 10 onwards, we stayed in Chorley. We did all the moving around in the early years and then stayed there. And in town, my town itself, it was a bit like behind in times. So in my year at school, out of like the 100 and odd, 200 kids, I was the only coloured lad there.
Wow.
In the whole sort of like high school year. Whereas when you go literally 15, 20 minutes down the road to Preston, they'd have like a 30-70% ratio of black kids to white kids, do you know what I mean? And so whenever I used to go to my dad's, who lived in Preston, like I say, I see the positive sort of sides of being. You get called things like, "Oh, I bet you're good at this because you're this." But then I come back home to Charlie, and they'll be like, "No, I bet you're like this because like a completely different sort of mentality." But then when I got older, I think Charlie developed at the same time.
Yeah.
And just the world in general.
Yeah, cause I do see Charlie as quite a open place. Being someone who's not been brought up there, I do enjoy living there. And if anything, sometimes I feel like, I said this to you as well, it's like, I feel like it's the other way where people really want me to feel a part of the town, because I can't believe how many people, just from walking from our house to town, how many people will be like, hello, good morning, hello. And I always have felt like I've not been treated a certain way or anything. It's been really like a bit over welcoming, if anything. I'm not saying it's like that all the time, but I've always found it a very comfortable place to be.
I think it's the same thing of like, because of the way we sort of dress, people know you're approachable. But because they don't know how people act when they're hiding behind the culture sort of, I won't say hiding behind the culture thing, but if somebody's walking up the street with a full headscarf on and you can't really see the face, you're less likely to just give a jolly hello to that person. Yeah,
so I remember this coming up in a conversation, and not long after that, there was quite a big group of women who were all wearing burqas walking up, and I just thought, you know what? Let's not just presume that they don't want to say hello because they're wearing burqas. And so I made full on eye contact and was like, hi. And I didn't even need to see the rest of the face to see how much they lit up in their eyes. And just by that look in their eyes, I was like, wow, that's probably one of the first times that's happened to them, because they were just like, and they said hello back. I wasn't ignored. There was no head down, And that's not just because I'm a Pakistani person. I generally feel like I would have had that same response being anyone. But yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? I think it's hard because there's probably been circumstances where they are covered because they don't want to be spoken to or approached in that way, And
but then again, I don't think that's always the case. I think it's because we obviously understand that a lot of the time it's not their choice to even wear that scarf in the first place.
Yeah, in some cases, yeah.
So there's just from where they're from demands that of them, whether they be that they're married and stuff and they're not supposed to show the face or whatever. But I think once you understand that about people, you look into sort of why do they wear their headscarves and not be afraid of people, whatever, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You realise that underneath it, she might be even a bigger drinker than you. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say that, but but she might be just more.
It's just you don't know who the person
approachable.
is.
Yeah, she might be really approachable underneath.
Yeah.
You just really don't know until you stop and say hello. Do you know what I mean? It's like my favourite people in the world are eccentric people.
Yeah.
I love eccentric people that I was scared of when I was younger, because I thought I would have said something like, well, that person's weird. But now I just love how free them people are. And I feel like, but a lot of the times when you walk past the street and if they're really eccentric and they're wearing something crazy, you might be a bit scared to stop and speak to them. But 9 times out of 10, if you say hello, they're going to give you the most jolly hello back. But it's the same with somebody that's wearing the traditional clothing. Just because they're wearing that traditional clothing doesn't mean that they don't want to have an interaction. Or
sometimes I think, rather than thinking with the interaction thing, I think sometimes it can feel like if they are dressed a certain way, that unless you're dressed like that, you may not be someone that they want to speak to. Do you know what I mean? Because I think it can feel like that from the other side. Like, I can't say that someone in traditional clothing, I've not walked past them, and that might be a reflection of my cultural outbreak, but I've sort of gone inwards on myself sometimes and gone, oh, maybe they don't want to speak to me. But then now I want to feel that, like you said, be that bridge gapper now and
just
go,
keep saying hello no matter what.
That's it. Let's not do that. Let's not have this division. It doesn't matter. Because I'm not dressed the same as you. Doesn't mean like I'm not a good person.
I really remember you telling me a story about I think it was your dad being on a bus where when he first came over from Pakistan, he didn't have much interaction with English people, but there was one guy that just wouldn't stop.
Yeah, it wasn't actually recently when he'd come from Pakistan, because my dad had been here when I was 6 months. This was, I would say I was probably like 15 or 16 at the time. and he used to get the bus to work.
Yeah, but he didn't have many English friends there at the time.
No, he very much associated from not just Pakistani people, but in particular probably people from around his village at home was who he associated himself with a lot. And he had a forced interruption by our lovely family friend Alan, who his family are from Kansas.
Wow.
And he's American, and he just had this mad background where he'd even like met the Queen, and he just had all these crazy experiences, and he would talk to anybody.
This is the thing, because I remember you saying, like, obviously your dad didn't want to speak to him at first. He kept saying this weird man's trying to talk to him on the bus every day.
Yeah.
But before you know it, this man's in your house
having tea. He used to just sit next to him because he saw him that often.
Yeah,
he wasn't somebody who saw difference in colour, and this is why he was such a wonderful man. He passed away, I think I was 17 at the time when he passed. No, I was 19, and he'd become such an amazing family friend. By this point, it was really awful to lose someone as bright as that, because he was such a bright light for other people, but hadn't necessarily been that, I think, for himself. He was so busy giving it to everybody else.
He's taught about
and he just didn't see the division and separation. He was like, well, I see you every day, I'm not going to ignore you. And then before they knew it, what they had in common was that he had a best friend called Brian, who, bless him, he's now passed away as well. And it just happened that my mum taught Brian at college. She used to have an adult course where she taught English, and that ended up being the connection between them both. No one would have ever known, and I don't even know how it came back. I don't know whether Brian was on the bus one day and it just came up in conversation, and before we knew it, now if my dad did ever see him, I mean, whether he wanted to or not, they'd end up stopping and having a chat anyway.
Exactly. This is like we said at the very start, though, isn't it? The very start of the conversation was everybody's got. If you look hard enough, you've got something in common with everybody.
You know what? Yeah, exactly that.
If you really do look hard enough.
And this was someone who was originally from America, one person from Pakistan. Both, actually, the first thing that's in common there is they're both living in a country they weren't actually from. And you're so right there.
Yeah, I've had things like that happen to me so many times with people. Just when I'm in my own space and I've got music and they just don't want to stop talking to you. Do you know? And then, like, it happened to us once on. We were going on a holiday and a guy wouldn't stop talking to me and you.
Where? Which holiday?
And he was called Tony. It was one time I caught a train up to the airport.
Oh God! Do you know what my memory's like? But I do vaguely remember.
But we had such a nice conversation.
Yeah, I can't place where or what you look like now.
But I just remember that interaction. It made us smile. Like, we just couldn't stop smiling for hours after it, could we?
Yeah, I think it's because we were just like, oh, what a...
And I can't remember what he said or what he did. He just forced himself upon us, but we were just like, what a pleasant person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for life.
Initially, we were like, why do you want to talk to us? And then we were like, oh, do you want to come? Do you know, like, we were like, and like, I find most of them type of interactions that you have with people, they're the best ones, aren't they?
They are, and you've always said that, haven't you? I love just meeting random people and being in situations where you get chatting to random people, because you were saying this about hostels, weren't you? We've both had actually separate experiences about that, because whenever we've been away and stayed in a hostel, we've never actually been together, have we? We've travelled separately there just because it's either been work or, events where we've not been together. And the hostels are just like, you meet the funniest people who are just very down to earth, I think is what it is.
Yeah, 100%.
I think if you can stay in a hostel, you don't really have like a lot of...
you have trust in people.
Yeah, that's it. You have a little bit more trust, don't you? That's what it is. And you don't have as much fear.
But don't get me wrong, I had to force myself to stay in the hostel. There's
there's been a few times I've not wanted to.
Of going up, where I think the last time I did stay, I could have easily just paid, but I got a hotel and stuff. But I actually thought, no, be more interactive.
Yeah, because it was a very sort of social.
Social thing that was going on. I thought, no, do you know what? Go stay where the social things happening. Just talk to strangers and you have a better experience. And I didn't have as much sleep, but I had definitely better. Do you know what I mean? But I had more stories to sort of.
Yeah. And they ended up being the main part of your stories.
Because it's just sometimes you can put yourself out there, aren't you? And you get rewarded for doing that.
Would you say you was bridging gaps there? By putting yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, because you could have easily just been around what you was familiar with.
In a way, yeah, because just putting yourself in sort of areas where allowing people to talk to you could clear up any judgment they have of you. They could walk away and still have the same judgment of you. It's out of your hands, but
they could walk away and meet someone else like you and not judge them.
Because of the interaction they've had. Do you know what I mean? That's why I really make it sure, especially when I'm dressed very sort of urban, to be more courteous to older people.
Mm.
And I see it baffle some people's heads where they're just like, I expected him to be rude and arrogant then. Because I've marched over like I am.
Yeah.
A focus on something, but they don't realise like that's how most of us are.
Yeah.
We're just normal people. It's just we just like to wear something.
Yeah.
Something it makes us feel comfortable.
So I think people have found me like quite unapproachable before. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm just on a day where I do want my own space, especially when you do a lot of social stuff. I would say most of my life is very social.
Yeah, but you're a very busy person.
I'm very busy. So sometimes I don't want to be always approached. Sometimes that's my shutdown time where I need to like fill up my own cup.
It's
so
the
it's not
same
in a
thing
rude
of
way.
like people got to take the time if you feel like someone's being unapproachable, just have a bit of more sort of think back and just think, no, she might not just be doing that because it's me. It might be because she's got a lot going on. Like, you're very busily mentally. Like, when we're sat at home, I can see sometimes you're just gone. But, and then the next day I turn around and you show him something that you've a new project that's happening. But because in that moment of staring into space, do you know what I mean? That's what you was doing.
This is getting too common. Everyone keeps saying this about me. So, like, sometimes I'll be teaching and the students will just be like, she's gone. Oh, no. She's back? No, she's gone. Wait, she's staring into space. That means she's thinking about something and we've not to disturb her. Whereas before, I used to have to constantly explain that, but I was just like, I have to understand what I'm creating, and sometimes I'm not on this plane. I need to go somewhere else.
Well, that's it. It's just that having a bit, and I think that's why we can get on well, because sometimes I can look at you and I'll joke to you and be like, oh, not listening out it, but I just know I have to give you like that creative time in your mind, because I need that sometimes as well. And it's not that you're being ignorant or you don't want to talk to me. It's just that something is really taking over your mind and you just need to give it that attention.
So sometimes it's something really important, and sometimes it's the weirdest, most random thing. But
and then I tell you off, Vicky, you were thinking about clothes all that time. Do you know what I mean?
Most of the time it's probably not that, but you know, same with you. I can sort of see when you're in a thought process and when not to disturb that, because I think, like you said, that's something we have in common, isn't it? Where it's like, wait for you to come back here.
It's just the artistic side of us.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, a lot of artistic people are like that, aren't they?
Everyone has different ways, don't they?